Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to go over ICP, and specifically I want to talk about the tokenomics and kind of more importantly kind of the inflation statistics of ICP, just because realistically I think that's kind of the main complaint, or I guess maybe a kind of boiled down version of the main complaint that I receive regarding ICP is that ultimately the price action is terrible, and the price doesn't do very well, it doesn't pump very hard. And there's a couple different reasons I think I've identified as to potentially why that might be, and what potentially we could do of like how to fix it, and also is it even a problem kind of in the first place. And so anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. So looking here, we can see that ICP actually has a circulation dashboard, and they give you almost complete clarity into kind of how this, like the inflation of the ecosystem works, which I think is really, really nice because it makes it very easy for us to like kind of dive into how like specifically these things are working. And so we can see a couple of different things. So first off, we can see that there is an annual inflation rate of 6.63% through voting rewards. Done, right? Okay, now we know that ICP's inflation rate is 6.63% a year, right? Well, not quite, because there's a couple of different things going on. And so the first thing that we can see here is there's undispersed and dispersed voting rewards. So there's almost 90 million ICP that technically have been earned, but have not been dispersed because they aren't actually paid out in ICP directly. They're paid out in neurons, and then that can be converted into ICP. And so what we can see is, dispersed is almost 42 million ICP. And we can see even just so far in this month where we can see almost 825,000. This fluctuates because people do have to claim it. And so obviously like what we can see here in, August of 2022, there's 2.7 million paid out, where in, something like, May of 2023, there was only, just under 400,000 paid out. So the next piece with this whole inflation statistic is we have the node provider rewards. Now the node provider rewards, as we can see, are much smaller than what we get from voting rewards, but they still are paid out nonetheless. And we can see, recently it's been kind of on the range of about 400,000 ICP. Now, this happens mid-month, and so I believe that we've already actually seen this happen for October. And so that kind of the next bit that we'll see will be in November. The node provider rewards are a little bit difficult for me to understand. So if any of you guys have like more context or an explanation as to how these work, I'd love to hear it, because ultimately, what this like question or like information box says is essentially is like, this is the amount minted for ICP providers for the purpose of like rewarding the nodes, right? Rewards are typically minted in the middle of the month. Node provider rewards are typically fixed per node per month in fiat terms. That's why we see this amount fluctuating, is because the fiat terms are like different here. And so that's kind of like one of the core pieces to this is, this does fluctuate, and it's kind of hard for me to understand exactly how these are getting paid out. Sorry, all the dashboards went away for a second, but anyway, what we can see is, in just October so far, we've seen, 368,000 paid out to node providers, and then for voting rewards, and just in October, we can see about 825,000. So what we can see is about 1.2 million ICP injected into the ecosystem just for the month of October. Now, what we can also see here is there's this kind of last component, which is the number of ICP burned. And now, the thing that I actually find really interesting about the ICP ecosystem is it kind of has this like fluctuating market dynamic, very similar to Ethereum in terms of, there is this ICP injected into the ecosystem primarily via voting and node provider rewards. But the second piece is when people are actually hosting apps on the ICP ecosystem, they have to pay to have their like apps hosted on the ecosystem. And this causes kind of a jump in the amount of ICP burned. And so the more people using the ecosystem, the more ICP is burned. What we can see is total through the lifetime of ICP, there's about 350,000 burned. Now, what we can see is, at the beginning of September, there's about 174, and now there's about 350. So we essentially, we've seen this double within the past like month and a half or so, and that has been due to, some continued adoption of the ICP ecosystem and some more activity happening on it. But ultimately, it's continued to trend up. Like obviously back in, 2022, early 2022, we saw a little spike, and then things basically flattened out a little bit. What we can see here is obviously we saw quite the massive jump here, but it's continued to kind of go up relatively linearly so far. And so this is something, in my opinion, that looks pretty good. And so ultimately, we now get into this like all of this is very much producing like a mixed rate in terms of inflation, right? Because what we do know is that voting rewards are currently at 6.63%. It will come down to 5% as kind of the projected by 2029. But at least right now we're at 6.63, but it's not all paid out because there's, you essentially have to claim it. So that means that, potentially we could have a lower like real rate of inflation, even though the potential rate could be higher. Same thing with, node providers. That's going to add in addition to, all of the like voting rewards. This is in addition, but then you also have kind of the negative component to it, which is the ICP burned. Now, at this point, the amount of ICP burned is almost inconsequential compared to the amount of ICP introduced into the system. It's like almost like not even worth figuring. But it is important to note that the trend here, right? Recently, we have seen this go up like a massive amount within the past month or so. Now, obviously, even if we take the past month, we've increased almost 200,000 ICP within the past 45 days, you could say. Well, within the past month, we've added in 1.2 million ICP into the ecosystem. So there is very much like a lot of new ICP being entered into the ecosystem, which is why we can kind of see like over a long enough time frame on ICP that it started at $400 and essentially has kind of deflated away down to about the $8 that we're sitting at right now. So I think this is kind of the general complaint of people who are ICP haters. And it's a valid complaint, right? I do think that what we're seeing with kind of all of this stuff happening, ICP is still very much in an inflationary ecosystem. And until there is the demand, that you're essentially going to have people who are continuously deflating or inflating the price, potentially dumping. However, if we continue to see this type of thing happen, the metrics start to change very quickly, right? Obviously, there have been, if you've been at all on like the ICP, like, X and all that type of stuff, there have been incredibly like minor amounts of time where ICP has technically become deflationary. And that's mainly because this stuff is not counted over time. But the narrative still goes that like things are changing, right? And the biggest bet as an ICP like supporter you would be taking is that usage on the platform continues to grow, which means the number of ICP burned continues to go up, which means that the real rate of inflation continues to decrease and potentially even goes deflationary. And so that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to cover. The last thing that I want to get into here was the ICP supply. Now, the ICP supply we can see is essentially how you can back into a real rate of inflation, because what you can see is from a year ago, the total supply was about 508 million ICP. Today, the total rate is about 524 million. So I've used my calculator and essentially plugged these numbers in. We've inflated about 16.5 million ICP from this year to from last year to right now. And that over the total supply works out to about a 3.25% inflation rate. Really not that bad, especially when we're taking some of these mixed metrics of node providers plus the voting rewards, and the voting rewards being, over 6%. It really doesn't look too bad overall. And so, obviously it is still very much inflating, and inflation is going to produce consistent selling pressure on the market. This is kind of the whole basis of like fiat currency as well. They continually inflate the currency, which continually devalues the purchasing power of the people who hold it. And so this is kind of the main concern of people who are like ICP haters, I guess you could say. It's if this continues to inflate into infinity, which theoretically it could, there's just no reason to hold it ever, right? Like there might be reason to use it, and there might be reason to stake it because you're going to be getting some of that like inflationary reward, but you can't really just like, if you're just sitting there holding it in a wallet, like that's not really a great like long-term plan. Obviously the technology of ICP seems very, very good, and it is very, very good in terms of what it can deliver, but ultimately, you have to have users. And so this is where, kind of, I think if I were to kind of like communicate my biggest complaint of ICP, the biggest complaint that I have of ICP, or the biggest concern, I guess I would say, is not the tokenomics, it's not the technology, it's the marketing. ICP is incredibly challenging to understand. A lot of people just either don't know about it or don't understand it. And ultimately, like, that's on ICP, right? If like they're trying to get people to use their ecosystem and to adopt their product, they should teach people how to use it, and they should get it in front of people. Marketing is just as much how you build a winning product as the technology. If you've got the best technology in the world with nobody that knows about it, you're going to lose. Where you could have the worst product in the world with great marketing and you might win. There are thousands of examples of how this has happened in real life and through different historical contexts. And so this is something that could happen to ICP as well, even though the technology is really, really good. And so anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really, really does help me out and continue to grow this channel. And ideally, kind of help instruct and teach people and kind of spread the news about ICP, because ultimately, like, that's the main thing that I think is missing. And I'm hoping that maybe my channel could help kind of spread that word in a way. And so, if you do want to support me, a like and subscribe really does help out. If you have any like feedback or thoughts or comments, anything regarding anything in the video, please feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below. It really, really does help me out. Also, if you guys are wanting to trade ICP or even just kind of buy and accumulate more, you can feel free to use my link in the description below, as that'll help you out a little bit. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.